We're happy to have two expert presenters this evening. Our AAUW Public Policy Co-Chair, Susan Scott. And Susan is also the AAUW Morton, Illinois branch president. She's an ally and advocate, obviously, and she's a mom, a wife, and a working class girl. We're really looking forward to her presentation. And A J Conroy is with us again for information about ERA. She's a practicing attorney and member of the Chicago Incorporated AAUW branch. She's a passionate ERA strategist and activist. She's managing the social media for ERA Illinois and Equal Pay Day Chicago, as well as Chicago Craftivists. She also is a mother of two kids, and her superhero is She-Hulk. We're pleased to have both of these presenters with us. And now I'd like to turn it over to Susan.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to try and take over control.
And share your screen instead of mine.
So do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Fantastic. Hi, everyone. I don't know who, we've got 13 people here, so hi. I have put together a simple presentation. It shouldn't take too long, and then we'll hop over and ask AJ questions about the ERA. So I'm going to talk at the beginning. I want to just take a moment to breathe. I like to breathe at the beginning of presentations, but I like to think of a field and imagine yourself standing in this field. And as we stand there all by ourselves and we think about the issue of equity for women and girls, it's easy to stand there isolated and feel that, why is it 2020 and we're still talking about this stuff? It's so discouraging to think that we're still talking about ERA after all this time. And it's easy to get discouraged and it's easy to get tired. But what I challenge us to do is, as we visualize ourselves standing in that field all alone, I would like for you to imagine a tribe of women who are coming up behind you, and they put their hands on your shoulders and they give you strength. And you recognize that these women standing behind you are actually the generations of women who have come before us and who have struggled and survived just so that we can be here in this moment. And they look at us with huge smiles and laughter and tears of joy when they see us and the freedoms that we have, the fact that we can marry who we want to marry, the fact we can own property, the fact that we can vote, the fact that we can fight for our rights. And then as we stand in that field, we can imagine the generations of women ahead of us, and we put our hands on their shoulders. And that hope that there will be a generation that will exist where there is equity for all, and humans are humans, and all are treated with respect and love. And we're not alone. We are linked arm in arm in this fight. And we are all the pivot points between those generations. So our work is hard. And I'm going to stay esoteric just for a couple more minutes. Stick with me. I want to talk about how life is lived on lots of levels. The fact that we are autonomous individuals is one part of our existence. And yet, equally part of our existence is the fact that we live in collectives. We have families. We have organizations that we're part of, like AAUW. We have societies, we have countries that we're a part of. So we live individually and collectively. Is the audio okay? Okay.
It's a little low at times.
Okay, I'm getting an echo.
Yeah, Sally, I think you need to mute your mic. Okay, will do.
Okay. So then there's also, so that's a dichotomy, the fact that we're individual people and we live also as collective people. And then we also have interior lives where we have our thoughts and feelings and emotions. But then we have this part of our lives where we're expressing ourselves outwardly. And so issues like equity for women and girls is experienced on all of these levels. We experience that as an individual and also collectively. It's also affecting our interior lives and our exterior lives. So let me show you what I mean by that. And I won't take long. When we think about women and equity for women and girls, we have certain thoughts and beliefs and feelings about them. So Susan Scott has particular beliefs and thoughts. So does every other person on this planet. And they're different and they're personal and they evolve and they change. Also, as a group, what we think and feel collectively changes. And you can see that when you see cultural shifts happen. The collective thoughts of what's appropriate for women and girls was different for my mother's generation than it is now. And it's different in 2020 than it was in 2018 before Me Too. So collectively, we shift our thoughts and beliefs. Now let me go to the upper right quadrant. So this is me as an individual, Susan Scott. How do I express my thoughts and my beliefs? I do that by doing actions. I advocate, I vote, I parent differently because of how I think. And then the bottom right is where I think a lot of people just feel like public policy resides, and that is how do we collectively live in a way that reflects our collective beliefs and thoughts. And that's the laws and the systems and the services that we have in our world. And so when people talk about public AAUW and public policy, they kind of get stuck down here in this lower right quadrant where we're talking about laws. But I want you to understand the reason why you're standing in that field and feeling so overwhelmed is the fact that the work that we're doing strives to affect all of these quadrants. We're striving to affect people's thoughts and beliefs on an individual level, collectively, and then also what people are doing and how our society works. So the work we're doing is hard. Okay, so I just want to put that in perspective before I dive into the work that we've done and the work that we can be excited about. Illinois has become a beacon for women's equity issues in recent years. I've listed some big wins here. Last year, Illinois passed the RHA, which was a big initiative. We updated our outdated laws with the notion of Roe v. Wade potentially being overturned. It's no longer, you know, oh, that could never happen. With that as a possibility, we really needed to get to work to clean up our laws, and we've done that. And we treat abortion and contraceptive care and maternal care just like all health care. The other big win was Illinois now has a salary history ban. Employers can no longer ask applicants about their salary history, which is really leveling the field for women. The other big win I listed here is that just a couple weeks ago, the statute of limitations has been lifted for people to make claims against situations of criminal sexual assault and abuse. And then, of course, we're going to talk in much more detail about how in 2018, Illinois became the 37th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. And so that can move forward. And AJ is going to bring us up to speed on Virginia and onward. So if you're not familiar with how AAUW Illinois does public policy, I wanted to let you know that we have a lobbyist. Her name is Jenny Perdue. She's the daughter of Paula Perdue. And she represents AAUW in Springfield. And the other important part of AAUW is we join coalitions of like-minded organizations, and we work together to move the needle. So here is a list of the coalition that worked on the RHA last year. And you can see that we partnered with some great organizations. So, you know, we're at the table. We're a part of making the change. So what's coming up this year? There are some big changes. The state Senate president was, I want to say, on the 19th. There's a new state Senate president. His name is Don Harmon, and he replaces Tom Cullerton. So there's going to be some of that political drama of shifting roles and different people doing different things. But right now it looks like he's going to keep the same staff and is saying that he's not going to shake up too many things, but we'll see. The big issues that we know are going to be of interest to us this year is the repeal of the Parental Notification Act, and also the comprehensive rewrite of Illinois sex education law. So there's already coalitions working on both of those issues, but now that there's also coalitions working on other issues, but the session actually starts on January 28th. On January 29th is when Pritzker does his State of the State address. And then after that, then for 2 weeks, the representatives get to draft all their bills and present them to leadership on February 14th. And then it's after that date that the leadership then decides which of those bills will then go to committee to then work through the process. So I'm not at a point right now where I can say, you know, this is the bill and this is the bill number that we as AAUW are going to be working towards passage this session. We're just a little bit early on that, but at least now you know the process, and hopefully you'll join us on the Google groups, or be plugged in with your branch in knowing what bills we are going to be supporting and advocating for this year. I also just want to take a minute and make sure that you all understand that Kim Churches has stated these areas that we're going to focus on in 2020 at a national level, and you can read these. You can see they are totally nonpartisan. They're totally mission driven. equal pay for equal work, investing in education, reducing student debt. You know, we've done the work. We've got the women in college now. More than 50% of students at higher education are women, but 2/3 of the debt is carried by women. So you see, we've got work to do. We've got to strengthen Social Security and implement paid leave. And hopefully that paid leave will be one of the upcoming bills in Illinois. We'll see if that happens. I also want to make sure that everyone understands that these pillars and these areas of focus, they are driven by the members in AAUW. Every other year, members get to contribute and state what they believe the priorities should be. And I've listed here the priorities that everything is driven from. And there's a link here. If you go to aauw.org and type in public policies, you can find this document. It's really good to have, to know where everything derives from. And I also want to make sure that members are aware that there's a new initiative that AAUW is launching, and it's intended to bring that, you know, here, let me go back. So these may be our thoughts and beliefs, okay? And then at the branch, this is how we can exhibit and demonstrate and express those beliefs. So we can do substantial things like conduct an annual meeting with your representatives or legislators. You can make sure you've got a branch policy chair who is working and collaborating with the state public policy chair. And then you can have a public event. People are signing up for the Action Network. So these are substantial things that we can do to express how we think and feel. Okay, so this is my like fancy corporate presentation. Now this is my brighter, bolder, funner couple slides I presented at our state convention, and it was simple pro tips. These are things, easy things that different members can do. So this is, if you're a public policy chair at your branch, these are 5 simple things that you can do to really knock it out of the park. And then if you're a branch member, these are simple things that we can do to move and promote and advocate AAUW's policies. And then finally, if you don't know how to become an advocate, here's some simple things you can do. We make it easy for you. You can do the 2-minute activist. You just go to aauw.org, type in 2-minute activist. You can sign up for the areas that you want to be notified on. AAUW will then send you a text when and if that issue needs to be communicated to your legislators. You'll get a text and it'll say, do you want to reach out to your senators about this issue? And you say yes, and they're notified. You can also fill out a witness slip for illinois.gov to let your legislators know that you are watching them regarding specific issues that happen to be in committee or being deliberated. And that will be communicated to you by the public policy chairs, like myself, or your branch public policy person. And here's the other thing I always like to remind people: we live in a representative democracy. Your legislator, whether you voted for him or not, or her or not, they represent you. They work for you. Please call them, please email them, please talk to them, let them know how you feel. Not that they have to feel the same way, but they need to know how you feel. Okay, so here's the big reveal. Woo! So we are happy to announce that our next Springfield Day is going to be on March 19th, just a couple months away. So here's pictures from last year. I just wanted to encourage everyone. So you see some familiar faces there. So when the day we went, there just happened to be a handmaids protest. There was a lot of handmaids in watching the gallery and walking through the Capitol. On the right is Jenny Purdue, our lobbyist. She is talking to Tracy, who is my cohort and my other co-chair for public policy. At the bottom there, you see our current president, Jennifer, on the right, and our incoming president, Lisa, on the left. So hopefully I'll see you all in Springfield on March 19th. And with that, I just wanted to say the work that we do matters. And, you know, if you ever feel discouraged, just visualize our field filled with our encouragers and the people that we're working towards. So I'm going to turn off my screen. Here we go. And I don't know, AJ, there you are. Yeah.
Hi.
So now in this part of our webinar, if AJ and I just plan to have a little bit of questions about ERA.
Yeah, some dialogue about our one of our favorite topics at AAUW. And Susan, I really always appreciate hearing that visual exercise that you do about remembering your place in the continuum of activists, remembering the people that came before you, remembering the people that will come after you, as a way to encourage you on when the work can get hard. So thanks for sharing that again.
Yeah. So it's been confusing. There's been like so much in the news, and I don't know about all of you, but it's overwhelming. So hopefully you know all of the answers to life's questions, AJ. So tell me, okay, so Virginia voted on it. So as of today, is the Equal Rights Amendment ratified then?
It's not, but don't panic, that's fine. So what happened was that both the House and the Senate introduced resolutions at the same time, and at the same time went through their process, just like Illinois, going through committee, passing out of committee, reading X number of times, and then voting. And they scheduled it so that the votes would happen almost simultaneously in the House and the Senate. And apparently the folks that were in the galleries of either chamber were sort of having kind of these weird stereo moments where they would hear cheering from other chambers. So they passed, I think, within a few minutes of each other. But now they have to sort of bless the other's work. So if you remember in Illinois, it went up through the Senate first. The Senate voted. All the women senators, except for one, voted for it, and you know, men did as well. And it passed, and it was very exciting. And it happened kind of quick. We didn't quite know it was going to happen that day. So the people that were there, it was sort of lucky for them. And then it had to go through the House process, and then the big vote happened in the House. So here, Virginia was, because of all of the drama and work in the prior legislative session, this time they came into session knowing they were going to pass it, and they did. And so they were able to orchestrate this great political theater and drama, and really just savor this moment of victory that has been worked on for so many people. So the long answer is not yet, but soon. And the short answer is no. But what I'm hearing is next Monday or next Tuesday might be the date that it's all sewn up. And then it'll have to go, I think, through their version of Secretary of State. and then it'll be sent on to the archivist. This is the same process that that we did in Illinois. So if you didn't know what the Secretary of State does, they do a lot of things, and one of them is apparently they send things out from the state to other states and to the federal government, and resolutions ratifying a constitutional amendment is one of those jobs Jesse White does, and whoever that his counterpart is in Virginia will do.
Okay. Okay. So then what's going to happen after that?
That's sort of the big question. So there are, I can tell you what will sort of technically happen in a just sort of administrative procedural view. The certified version is going to go to Washington, and according to statute, it's the archivist who is designated as the sort of keeper of the files. And what this person has done in the past is they get that sheet of paper and they put it in the folder, and they make a little notation that says, you know, this state sent it in, check, and then they put it back on the shelf. And this is a purely ministerial type of job. So when this happened with Nevada, you know, he put it in the file, wrote it down, check. You know, he had Nevada as ratified. Illinois, same thing, check, ratified. And so presumably he was going to do that with Virginia, but the plot thickens, and 3 states have sued, preemptively telling the archivist, no, 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 don't do that. You cannot do that with Virginia. Stop. And they asked a court to tell him to do that. So this poor guy is sort of in the middle of a fight that I'm sure he really would rather not be involved in. I don't know him personally, but you know, he's like the head librarian for the country. This poor guy is in the middle of not 1 but 2 court cases. So the first one I explained, and those are the states. It's Alabama and South Dakota, and oh, the last one is escaping me. I want to say maybe Louisiana. I'm not sure. Kate, there's a link for an article called Indiana Lawyer. If you could drop that in the comments, that will go through the cases, and also that article has links to the complaints, so you can read what people are saying. So that's sort of one road block. So the poor archivist, again, not a lawyer, librarian, he gets this lawsuit and goes, so he does what any rational person would do, and he calls his lawyer. His lawyer is the Department of Justice. And so the Department of Justice says, hang on, let's look into it and we'll give you an opinion. And so they do. A few weeks ago, they issued an opinion and they said, no, you're not supposed to certify if Virginia ratifies, so don't do it. And the archivist goes, okay, on advice of counsel, my lawyers are telling me that I can't certify for Virginia when it arrives, so I won't unless the court tells me otherwise. So,
Really?
you know, you can't blame him that he is, I mean, when I say ministerial, I mean, literally, he's just stamping the document. And it's too much to ask him to make a legal decision, you know, to give an opinion. So he is sort of throwing up his hands and saying, court, tell me what to do. So some have said that the Justice Department, in their opinion, really overreached. They didn't just say, we're looking at the law and we think this. They went even farther. And they talked about how the other ones weren't acceptable, and we say it's dead. And you know, there's this idea of separation of powers, and the executive branch, if you look at Article 5, they're really not involved, and they really shouldn't be doing anything but being a repository. So it's a bit controversial that they went so far and so aggressive in saying it's dead, stop bothering us. Especially because there is a similar opinion, not a similar opinion, an opinion from the exact same office that said the opposite, which is no, you can, you know, you can not that you can accept ratifications, because that hasn't been a question before, but they said that the deadlines, for example, are things that Congress can determine, and this is not our bag, and you know, Congress, you do you. So it's a bit of a change there.
So speaking of Congress,
Yes.
what role do they have in this?
So what many are arguing is that Congress put a deadline on, then Congress extended it. Therefore, Congress can extend the deadline again or waive it entirely. So there are two pieces of legislation that are pending in Congress. One is H.J. Res. 79. And just a quick note that this number changed a few months ago. It was H.J. Res. 38. And I know there were activities around the state of Illinois promoting that resolution. Contact your legislator, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you. Over half of the Illinois delegation is signed on as co-sponsors, but they changed the number, and the co-sponsors have signed up, so that's all fine. But it's 79, H.J. Res. 79. So it went through a committee hearing in the House, the Judiciary Committee, which is a bit busy right now on other things, but they, seeing the value and importance of the Equal Rights Amendment, had a day hearing on the Equal Rights Amendment, and have since published a report. So, and Kate, that's another link that if you can put in the comments would be great, but you're welcome to Google it yourself. And it's a really nice, comprehensive congressional report summarizing the witnesses that spoke at the committee hearing, and summarizing research and summarizing the opinions, for example, that I mentioned from the Department of Justice, both the newest opinion and contrasting it with the old opinion, throwing a little shade sometimes, like, we noticed you changed your mind. And there is also a minority report, which is helpful always to sort of understand where the other side is coming from. So right now, as we speak, it is before the House. It can be called up for a vote at any point, and hopefully it will be. Meanwhile, we have the Senate, and that resolution number is S.J. Res. R.E.S. 6. And it started off in a very bipartisan manner. They were having this strategy of including co-sponsors in pairs, of having a Republican and a Democrat to underline the importance of this being bipartisan. As you remember, in Illinois, this was bipartisan. And when I say bipartisan, I mean both ways. We had Democrats voting against it, Republicans voting for it. In Virginia, it was bipartisan as well. So the hope was the Senate would continue in that manner. Since then, more Democrats have joined on. I think sort of the pressure of the campaign trail has ratcheted it up. And so now I think they're up to 45 or so co-sponsors on the Senate side. The concern is that it is going to fall victim to party politics, as many things in Washington, D.C. do. But I have some hope that I want to impart. So my hope is, if we remember back in Illinois, there was this window of opportunity in 2018, in between the primaries and the general election. So people who were conservatives or who were concerned about being primaried sort of got over that hump, and they knew that they were going to be their party's representative on the ticket. Now they needed to make sure that they were moving more centrist, possibly, and appealing to a wider electorate. And there was a fear of a blue wave. This was sort of the first blue wave after the 2016 election. And no one knew. So Rauner was running, for example, and several Republican candidates were feeling incredibly vulnerable. And so we suspected that in order to get to the magic 3/5 vote, because remember, we needed more than a simple majority in Illinois, because we just have to be special, we needed it to be bipartisan to be successful. So we were able to convince enough legislators that tended to be more conservative in their social views that this was not controversial, that the Equal Rights Amendment was middle of the road fairness, which is I think something we can all agree with, but is sometimes difficult to convince people. And so it was successful, and there was a nice healthy number of Republicans giving really impassionate speeches on the floor of the House, talking about their daughters. And I have a copy of the transcript, and I read it every once in a while when I just need a little goose. So I recommend it to you. Yeah. And it was a nail biter of a vote, but we were able to get those Republicans. So the reason I'm giving you all this Illinois background is that I'm seeing the same set of circumstances brewing. The primaries in the Senate are coming up, in the next few weeks or so through spring. There are, I think it's 35 senators who are up for re-election. If 4 of the currently red seats turn blue, then the House will change control. Right. So this is, the thought that keeps Mitch McConnell and other Republican leadership up at night. How do we maintain our hold? And I think that the ERA could be one of the solutions to presenting themselves as a pro soccer mom candidate. Yeah. That this is an issue that is important to both progressive and conservative and moderate women. And here is a way to take someone who is from a purple state and say, I'm strong on taxes, I'm strong on, whatever their agenda is, but I am also pro fairness, I'm pro ERA. So ladies, please vote for me. So, so I think that in the coming months, especially this window between April and in the elections, is a good time to push in a key number of states. And I think there are 5 of them, and I'm going to list them off in a second. So my marching orders to you, I know most of us are from Illinois, but if you know people in these other states, this is the time to reach out to them, to share this strategy that I've just described to you, and encourage them to take some specific actions, which I will also discuss. So here are the states. Okay. Martha McSally in Arizona, Cory Gardner in Colorado, Susan Collins in Maine, Joni Ernst in Iowa. That's a bit more of a reach, I concede. Cindy Hyde Smith in Missouri, also difficult in terms of the strategy, but we always try. And then Tom Tillis in North Carolina. So if you know people in Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Maine, Missouri, North Carolina, these are the people that you are going to give a list of actions to. And if you need to spoon feed them and do all the work except put the letter in the mailbox, you do that, because that's what you can do. So here's what you can give them as an action list. Have them call those senators and then put it on their calendar so that it repeats, and every Friday or every Thursday or every Wednesday they call their two senators and say, this is really important to me. The call center or the receptionist, they're not tracking who is calling, they're tracking the issues. They have a list, they make a little tick mark. So it's calling repeatedly, especially if you get a group of people on the same issue and it keeps popping up in the call list. This creates this sense of pressure. Letters to the editor that name the senator. You want to make sure the senator sees it. All senators, all their staff, and their opponents have Google alerts and Lexis searches and all that other stuff. They see their name and they see the issue it's connected with. Keep repeating it. This strategy worked well in Illinois, and people would go to forums, town halls, etc., And, you know, every time there was a forum, it seemed like we were able to get at least one person to stand up there and ask a question about the ERA. They keep hearing it, their opponent picks it up and starts hammering. They have a chance to vote on it. They're not co-sponsoring, you know, they're not down with that. It's just an easy way to add pressure. If there are any articles about any women's issues whatsoever in the news, you go online, look at the article at the bottom. If there's a comment section, write a comment, call out the senator, talk about the ERA. You know, this might be better if we had the ERA, and it's possible. It's, you know, SJ Res 6, and, you know, Cory Gardner should vote for it. Cory Gardner should sponsor it. Host screenings of Equal Means Equal. If, you know, remember the first time you saw that and how angry you were? That had been our #1 recruiting tool. I've told Kamala Lopez, the director, about that. It just really changed hearts and minds, and so it will work in these other states. Post on Facebook, and again, name the senator because they will see it in their feed, and then submit newsletter articles to your organizations, and that's something that I can do to help you with. So if you go to eraillinois.org, it's not there today, but by this weekend it will be there, a blurb about what's happening with the Equal Rights Amendment and what needs to happen in Congress. So you just cut and paste, put your own name on it. I don't care about plagiarism. You just go ahead and take it, tweak it, whatever, and get it out there. And the more people hearing it, seeing it, it's repetition. That is the way to do it. So I've talked a lot about Congress. I need to put make the argument for another group. So there are competing views. And that also, this is a good time to mention the other lawsuit. So I mentioned the lawsuit from the states. There's also a lawsuit by individuals. They're led primarily by the group Equal Means Equal. They are the ones that produced the movie Equal Means Equal. And so they have sued in federal court in Massachusetts to also require the archivist to certify Virginia. So this is a good thing. This is a good strategy. This is very common in this type of civil rights litigation, is that you go at an issue from many different angles. It's throwing pasta at the wall to see what sticks. Yeah. You never know what's going to make it through, who might get knocked out. So what they did in their lawsuit, and again, if you look at that article, the reason I like the Indiana lawyer article is because it's written for lawyers, so it gets really nerdy, and they also have links to all the complaints, because we lawyers were like, well, look, I want to read what actually they wrote. So you can read for yourself, and it's nice, and they go through 3 different people, and again, this is all good strategy. So I'm expecting Illinois and Nevada and Virginia to also file a lawsuit. I don't know that for sure, but I would be shocked if they didn't, because if they don't, what they're basically saying is, oh, never mind. So Illinois has to defend itself. They have to say, no, we ratified, this is our intent. We need, you know, as the Attorney General for Illinois or whatever entity of Illinois, and that makes no sense, but we'll say, on behalf of the citizens of Illinois, please honor, you must honor under the law what we have done, how we have ratified. So it's possible that there'll be even more lawsuits. The best case scenario, the way to force the Supreme Court to rule on any issue, is to create what's called a circuit split. So the country is divided into sort of clusters of states that have appellate courts. We are in Illinois, we're in the 7th Circuit. And so if the 7th Circuit says yes on something and another circuit, like the 3rd Circuit, says no, that's not good, you can't have different laws in different areas of the country, the Supreme Court has to make a final decision. And this is really elemental constitutional law. So even if there wasn't a circuit split, it would be shocking that the Supreme Court would not want to feel compelled to weigh in and say, yes, there is another amendment to the Constitution, or no, there is not, you must start over, whatever they say. I read one blogger, a law professor, say that this was a real life law exam, and that's what it feels like. I mean, these facts are so unprecedented. They're really, anybody who's talking with confidence, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and then this must happen. Really, there's so much uncertainty we don't know. We have hope. We have what we think should happen, but it's hard to predict.
Okay. So
hopefully I haven't depressed you.
No, it's okay. So I do have to ask a question. So when I talked to my state legislator, he said it was a backdoor abortion bill. What would you say to someone stating that?
Yeah, that is definitely the party line that has gotten the most traction. You know, when we were first working on this in Illinois, it was bathrooms, it was the draft, and Girl Scouts and Social Security. Those were the issues. Those were all the issues that were recycled from the 70s, and they got laughed at when you know, the conservative groups were lobbying. They go in and they sit with the legislators, and the legislators are like, "Come on, let's stop." But when they started talking about abortion, that's when they got traction. So now you'll notice that more and more of the anti-groups talking points are all about abortion. Mm-hmm. I would encourage you guys to look at Steve Anderson's comments on this. He recorded a really nice conversation with the group Utah Coalition, and Kate, I have the link to that YouTube if you could put it in there. And you know, I think he really puts it well, so I'll defer you to his thinking. But you know, abortion right now is based on privacy. That's the constitutional framework for protecting abortion. You know, we've had a little, not the ERA, because obviously the ERA is not in the Constitution. Illinois has had a little ERA in our Constitution since 1970-71, mm-hmm. And yet we needed HB 40 in order to, for poor women to be able to be covered for abortions for, you know, medically necessary abortions. So if Illinois has the ERA and we needed HB 40, clearly the ERA is not an abortion bill. Mm-hmm. Anyone who says for sure that that's what's going to happen is wrong. But on the same side, you know, both sides are talking about it. Both the pro-choice groups who are pushing for reproductive justice say this is it. This is gonna you know, enshrine it in the Constitution, and I don't think they're right. But on the same side, I don't think that this is a backdoor into abortion. So, you know, there's a law professor, Julie Suck, who's been writing about this, S-U-K, and she's been calling the ERA, it's not a bullet, it's a vehicle. And it depends on who is driving it as to how it's going to be used. So there's no simple answer. But I think that the opposition is fear-mongering, and I think they're being dishonest in their rhetoric, and I think that people would maybe listen to them more if they were saying it could and maybe, as opposed to the next day after it's ratified, it's abortion on demand at your CVS. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of language that they're using, and that's also just not true.
Yeah. Okay. So how is the best way for folks to stay up to date and informed on this ever-changing topic? And then, you know, what can they do to help?
Yeah, so I'll start with how to stay informed. You're right, there has been so much news coverage. It's very exciting. And yet I keep running into people who don't know anything about this, and they make me crazy because to me, it's all that's been in my Twitter, but obviously my Twitter is a little different than other people's. But so here are two concrete ways that you can keep updated on it from good sources of information. So the first is to go to congress.gov and put in the two bill numbers that I mentioned. HJ Res 79.
Okay.
You know, type it in, it'll show you the bill, and almost at the top it'll say, do you want alerts? And you say, yes, thank you, I would love alerts. So, you know, you click that button, you fill in your email, and then in the morning, if there's any activity, you'll get an email saying there are new co-sponsors, or, you know, I had passed out of committee, blah, 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 whatever happens. So it's not very frequent, but that's nice. So then you know right away what's happened. And that is one of the most important areas. The second easiest is to do a Google alert. So the way you do that is google.com/alert, and there'll be a little search box, and it'll ask you what you want in there. The search string I would recommend. You know, I for years have had Equal Rights Amendment as my Google string, and once every week I might get an email about an article about the Equal Rights Amendment. This is, you know, before Nevada, you know, like 2014 through 2015. If I ever got a link about the Equal Rights Amendment, it was in someone's obituary about how they were working on it. Now I get 5 to 6 emails a day on that there are articles about the Equal Rights Amendment. So that's a lot. You don't need a fire hose. What I would do is put in Equal Rights Amendment in quotes, and so the search will return only that phrase, and then also the name of the archivist, Ferrero. And the reason I would do the archivist name is because you know that that article will be talking about what is happening specifically with the amendment, where it is in the process. He is central to whatever is happening right now, and a journalist will drop his name if it's about that. Otherwise, what you'll get is people talking about will or won't happen. Those are all great. You can do that too, but just that's if you want to narrow one, that's what I would recommend.
Okay, great. And what can I do to help?
Lots of things. Okay, so I'm assuming that you reviewed your address book with the list of 5 states, and you've already contacted those people, or I don't know, cold called other AAUW branches, I don't know, whatever. I just mentioned that. So what you can do in Illinois is you can post on social media the articles that pop up in your Google alert. You can share articles from ERA Illinois. So on Facebook, it's at ERA Illinois if you want to find it quickly. There's also a fabulous League of Women Voters Equal Rights Amendment site that's very active. I'm not sure what the shortcut is for it, but I think if you just Google or in Facebook, Equal Rights Amendment and LWV, I'm sure it will pop up. Their icon is the LWV, and I think yes on it. That's really good. And they do a lot of original posts. The next thing I would do is every time you see an article online about the Equal Rights Amendment and there are comments, mention the bill number in the comments. It gives somebody who is reading it an action. Journalists are not going to mention the bill number. It's so frustrating to me that they don't empower the reader to do something. They just inform. And I suppose it's a journalistic ethics thing that they are not supposed to nudge, but you can nudge. So in the comments say, this is the bill number, call your senator. And that is a great way to activate or give somebody marching orders, something to do. The other thing you can do if it's a traditional newspaper is a letter to the editor. And again, mention your senators, your congressperson, so that they see their name. And there are sample letters on eraillinois.org, but it's not that hard. You just write 3 sentences and say your name. Honestly, short and sweet is good. Lots of places are needing letters to the editor. Yeah, obviously Chicago is a different media market, but most places will absolutely do that. If your paper has a talk back section, that's another place that you can submit. And then the last thing you can do is for your branch, for AAUW or any other organizations you're involved in, garden clubs, women's groups, whatever, your church, put in a blurb about what's happening with the Equal Rights Amendment. Hey, did you know this is happening? It's great. I'm so excited to share it with you.
Great.
And then podcasts. I'm a big podcast fan, so let me mention 2 that I recommend. One is brand new, and it's called Ordinary Equality. and it's put out by the group Equality Now, and the host is Kate Kelly, who's a pretty great lawyer, very dynamic and fun, and the podcast is really interesting. And then if you want to get super nerdy, and I know you do because you've listened this long on our podcast or on our webinar, there's a great podcast called Ginsburg Tapes. And I'm not sure what the host does, but something that has her in the Supreme Court listening to things just from the comments that she made. But what she's done is she went back to all the times that Ruth Bader Ginsburg argued before the Supreme Court, and she annotates the oral arguments. So it's sort of like the like ESPN and play. And she's like, okay, so what Ruth is doing here is, and she'll explain what she means by what she says, and you know, and you hear the jokes that are not very nice, but that the justices give back, and the background, and it's a really deep dive, and you will come out of the podcast respecting RBG even more if that's possible. So I recommend it.
Great. Okay, well, I think that wraps up our questions, Elaine, if you want to take the reins.
Well, thank you so much, ladies.
My pleasure.
I hope that everyone shares all that we've learned with their branch and anyone in friendly organizations. We need to spread the word. I did have the question, are they totally ignoring the fact that prior amendments have had ignored deadlines? Or is there going to be some court case related to that?
That'll definitely be part of the discussion and deliberation. So there are a few different angles on it. You've got the states that have attempted to rescind, and there is no reasonable precedent on that. So there were a bunch of states who ratified the 14th and 15th Amendment, which are related to voting and slavery, and no take backsies. There's no vehicle for undoing a ratification. So I think that is the less controversial argument. The deadline is the bigger argument and the bigger hurdle. There are a few amendments that are more modern that have had deadlines in them. Prohibition was one of the big ones, and that one went through on like greased rails and was ratified in less than a year. That went well, right? The Madison Amendment, Eileen, is what I'm thinking you're thinking about, and that was 203 years. And I think that that's going to give a lot of precedent, both in how Congress reacted after the final state ratified, and the fact that everyone is behaving as though we have that Madison Amendment, even though it was not by any stretch contemporaneous. 203 years is a lot of time to pass, but Congress blessed it afterwards, and so many people are arguing, and I think a very convincing way, that's the roadmap. So if we get 79 and 6 passed, then great. But then again, you have another group who's arguing just as strongly that deadlines are just against the Constitution. If it's not in the Constitution, in Article 5, it's all extra and it can all be ignored. And the Supreme Court can agree with that theory.
Right. So it's all the more important for us to be active and communicate with everyone we know.
It is. And, even though the justices in the Supreme Court are not elected and are not supposed to be influenced by public opinion, they are human. So there is no reason to be shy.
Great. Well, thank you, ladies, so much.